for example 2, we are going to create an optional object from an object. So we're going to actually create an object first and then convert it to an optional. We're going to look at some of the caveats or things we need to be careful of when we use the of method. And then we're going to create an optional with an object that could be null. So in example 2, we want to create an optional object from an object. So we need to start with an object. So for that, I will create a string. So let's start with a string. And let's call it onion. And we'll just name it onion for simplicity. All right, so now we have a string variable onion with a string value of onion. Now, to convert this to an optional, again, we start with optional. We take the generic type for string, and we are going to call this one our optional string. Now, to create, or I should say to convert this string object to an optional object, we use the of method of the optional class. So we use optional dot of, and of returns an optional describing the given non-null value. So now if we do onion, we are happy. So optional string, so optional string, our string could be null of onion. So we're going to create our optional from our string object here, onion. All right, let's make sure that we have a value. So now we can do assert that optional string dot is present dot equals to, or I'm sorry, is equals to. Now that we have our optional string of optional, we're going to assert that optional string is present, which should return true. I like using the assertThats because this is very readable. All right, so we create an optional object from an object, string onion. We convert it to an optional object, optional type, and then we verify that that option string was stored as an optional. So if we save this, run as, and we pass. So in this case, optional string is present. Now, what happens if we do this slightly differently? So what if we did a string, null string, and we have a string value of null? Well, of is not going to like this. Of will actually throw a runtime exception. So to test that, to verify that, we will do assert. So we'll assert that exception of type. So we're expecting a null pointer exception is thrown by, do a function call here. All right, so we'll take optional. So we're going to do the same thing here, optional of, and we're going to take our null string. So we're asserting that we should get an exception of null pointer exception when we try to set our null string to an optional. So if we run this, that is the case. So how do we fix this? How do we avoid this? Well, with the introduction of, I think Java 9, maybe Java 10, they changed this. So they added an option that allows us to create a nullable option. So for that, we start with a new optional string. Okay, we have a new string. So this will be an option with null string, and we can set it equal to optional dot of nullable. And this will return an object describing the given value if non-null. Otherwise, it will return an empty optional. So this handles the null pointer exception by converting it to an empty optional. So we do of nullable, and then here we can pass in our null string. So now we should not get a null pointer exception. Instead, our option with null string should return an empty nullable or an empty optional. So let's check that. So let's assert that our option with null string dot is empty dot is equal to true. So what we're doing here is we're going to check to see if the optional we created here with a nullable string is empty and that it returns true. So we're checking to make sure that this guy is null, or is it returns empty when null instead of throwing the null pointer exception. So if we run this, it passes. All right, so for example 2, we started out by creating an optional object from an object. We started with the string onion with some text onion. We then created an optional variable and instantiated our optional string with our string onion using optional of. We looked at being cautious of using optional of with nulls. So if you pass in a null object and try to convert it to nullable with of, you will get a null pointer exception. However, optional did add an additional method to handle nulls called of nullable. So if you declare a string or declare an object as nullable or an object up to option, and it is nullable, you need to use of nullable.